welcome to the LTD work session. It's Wednesday, September 20th, and welcome everybody to be here and participate. Grateful for you to be here. We're going to start with roll call. Gino Grimaldi.
I'm here.
But offsite, so welcome. Susan Cox. I'm here. Pete Knox.
Here.
Kelly Sutherland. Here. Lawrence Green.
Here.
Michelle Weber. Here. And Heather Murphy. Here. Good. Thank you. I don't have any specific comments to begin the meeting today, except that we have a good agenda, a lot of interesting things to talk about, and we're looking forward to a good meeting. So take it away.
Sure. Well, thank you. Thanks for being here. Just a couple things to report out to the board. This past Saturday, we had a good event. We graduated 10 new bus operators. We started with a class of 10. So kudos to our training staff and transportation department for keeping all 10. And that's really the basis of how we continue to grow. So our focus is really on recruiting. We're happy to have those new members here. We did have graduation. We had in this room we had family in here and kids as well attended by the staff and then by the families of the graduates. So it was good. Also want to report we're working hard with Eugene Springfield Fire to address the impending closure University District. So we're approaching that with eyes wide open. LTD will be a resource in how we get people to peace out for medical. We're starting those conversations now. A lot of activity around that. We're grateful. Legislator Nathanson did reach out and wanted to know if they were going to be at the table. So she's facilitating our involvement in it as well. So we'll report back to the board as that moves forward. A couple events that we participated in. Springfield Celebration was a blast, a big deal. We did have entertainment at our Springfield station. We had salsa dancing lessons, and everyone who was there had a blast. I think one of the dancers tried to get the mayor to dance. It's unsuccessful, I believe. But it was a good time. And we also have several events at Eugene Station as well. Most recently, what music was that again? Marimba. Never heard of it, but it was fantastic. And it's amazing to see the how people's faces change when they walk by and stick around for that. And I got plugged into a chain of emails from a city employee that was talking about it. So we're going to intentionally invite them over for that. The next one, I think there's one on Friday. Yeah, Friday. I think the following Friday as well. Yeah, so 2 more. And then finally, in October, we'll have our budget committee meeting. So staff is working on revising the long-range financial plans. So we'll be happy to talk about that there. I think, with our new finance committee that we've started and with our work sessions, we'll be able to really dive in deep on what those levers are moving forward. We're also going to be looking at our long-range transportation plan and updating that. So we'll have some considerations for the future, which we'll bring back to the board as those become crystallized. We'll have those for sure by the October meeting, and then also for the retreat at the end of November as well. So stay tuned for that. And with that, I will take any questions.
I have a question. The mayor didn't dance, did you? I take that comment.
I tried to talk him into it. He was not going.
Not having that. Oh, yeah. Okay.
In my mind, I was thanks to that.
Okay, that's quite a picture. Okay. Are there any other comments or questions? Any announcements or additions to the agenda from anyone? Okay, then moving along. With audience participation, has anyone signed on to speak?
No.
Okay, we really are. Okay, Camille is going to give us a presentation on the 2023 Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Update. So our Chief of Staff, Camille Grimaldi.
Yeah, Granoli.
Just checking.
But it's Gandolfi, but Granoli works too. It's all Italian. Thank you for having me here tonight. So, for the. Oh, okay, sorry. So for the audio record, my name is Camille Gandolfi. I'm Chief of Staff, and I'm here with Amy Reichert, one of our project managers. And I will be providing a update as to what DEI has been up to for the past year. And Amy is here to help answer any specific questions, as she's been very involved over the last 2 years. 2 years. So I'm going to start with giving a little bit of a historical recap, since most of you are newer to the board. So in 2004, the first Diversity Council was formed by the district. In 2007, the board adopted its first diversity policy for the district. In 2020, the board adopted an updated diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. And in 2021, the board adopted a commitment to racial equity and reaffirmed the 2007 diversity policy. January of last year, the Diversity Council provided an annual update to the board, and in that update committed to continued participation in the pilot program for APTA's Commitment and Recognition Program on Racial Equity, committed to conducting a workplace climate survey on the perceived employee and stakeholder experience of existing policies, practices, and procedures. And sorry, lost my place. I should have brought my glasses. And to utilize those findings from the climate survey to develop the district's equity action plan. Now, the progress that has been made on those commitments last year are continued participation in APTA's Commitment and Recognition Program on Racial Equity. And the Workplace Climate Survey and the District Equity Action Plan have not yet been performed or developed. So the council went through a period of transition over this past year, and so adjusted their focus to some additional areas. And so I'll just list those off. We focused on policy and procedure updates, specifically around completing a pay equity analysis and guiding pay philosophy, updated guiding pay philosophy, and developing a performance management process that emphasizes fair compensation and performance. We worked with local consultants to cover a broad range of topics, from emotional communication to discrimination in the workplace. We had continued participation as an APTA racial equity signatory. We joined the Equity and Community Consortium locally. We participated in several local community events centered on cultural awareness and celebration. We established a baseline of workforce diversity metrics with a focus on race, gender, and generation demographics. And we established a baseline look at the internal perception of inclusivity through our employment engagement survey. And you'll see those numbers reflected in your packet. So for our future focus, the DEI Council is now called the DEI Task Force, and we have been taking a look at our membership, making sure we have the right voices at the table. And we have been redeveloping a new work plan with a focus on operationalizing DEI throughout the organization. So some of the work that we are doing now and will continue to do over this next year is engaging with our transportation counterparts and local community partners to collaborate on best practices, strategies, and key areas of focus, both in the industry and in the community. We are going to be reviewing our hiring and recruitment practices and reviewing our disadvantaged business enterprise process. And around Q4, we're going to be looking at potentially enlisting a DEI specialist, a specialized consultant to assist in performing the workplace climate survey and developing the diversity equity action plan. I know that was a lot I just threw at you. So I am happy to, Amy and I are happy to take any questions you may have.
Any questions from the board? Michelle?
What are the right voices? What does that demographic on the committee look like?
Sure. So with the transition that we have undergone over the last year, we kind of lost some voices at the table. So we're making sure that we have the right leadership level representation and the right department representation to really operationalize the EI throughout the organization.
Deep and wide. It was really, we had a meeting today, a council meeting today, and it was the first time we've gone around and we're introducing ourselves to a guest, and every department's represented, and it at every level of the organization. I think that's a really important answer.
So when you say the we, how many people is that?
I think there's 14.
How often do you meet?
We were meeting monthly throughout this kind of new development phase. We've been meeting every 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
Without perfect attendance, just
Yes.
Every 2 weeks. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the recap. Okay, moving on, Pat Walsh is going to give us a government relations update.
Thank you, Chair Cox and board members. Good evening. Tonight, we have two very important members of our LTD team here to talk about our government relations work. Sitting to my left is Jordan Weiss. Jordan is the Vice President for Oxley & Associates. Jordan and his team at Oxley represent our interests in Salem every year. They're really strong collaborators with us. And Brett Garson, who is in Washington, D.C. and is on Zoom, is the CEO with Smith, Dawson, and Andrews, SDA, as we call them. SDA has represented the interests of LTD and also members of United Front, which is the City of Eugene, City of Springfield, Willamette, Lane County, among others, for decades. And Brett's team does an excellent job working with the group to make sure we're in sync. Tonight, they're going to just give us an update in terms of where we are in terms of our government relations work, what's going to come up ahead here in Salem as we move towards January, and then what's going on in Washington, D.C. right now that we should be paying a close attention to. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Jordan, and then we'll go to Brett. So welcome, Jordan.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. Jordan Weiss, Vice President of Oxley & Associates. We've been representing LTD since 2019. I'm really happy to be here today, and I can answer. I'm going to do a tight 15, so I'm going to try to have a little bit of time to answer questions, but always happy to follow up to me or through Pat as well. So, yep, that's us. We can go to the next one. Thank you. So I want to set the stage a little bit for what happened in 2023 before we go into what we see going forward. The number one thing this year, the biggest change I would say in the legislature is change itself. We had leadership changes across the board. New governor, new speaker, new Senate Majority Leader, new Senate President. And with that comes a lot of growing pains. But along with that, you also have a huge turnover of the whole legislative body. Over half of the building has been there for fewer than 3 years. There's not a lot of institutional knowledge that we usually think about when we think about our decision makers in Salem or anywhere else. So it meant that there's a lot of people learning the process, and it actually was the first fully in-person session since the pandemic started. So even if you have been there in a couple of years, you're not used to being badgered by lobbyists like me in the hallway every 5 minutes. So with that, there were a couple scandals I'm not going to get into because they didn't affect our legislation as much, but it did provide a little bit of a flavor to it. And the budget was a big topic of conversation this year. We had been told by the Revenue Office and the sort of budget fortune tellers that we were going to be expecting a huge recession. And so get ready to tighten your belt was what everyone was told, including the budget writers themselves. The good news is that's not actually what happened. May revenue forecast came around. We had way more money than we expected. A lot of money did get sent out the door, but more for sort of a few larger projects as opposed to kind of a little bit of everything, which people had gotten when the money was coming down from the federal government. And then, of course, walkout politics. I'm going to be perfectly redundant for a lot of you who already know all this stuff, but this really is kind of the elephant in the room as it comes to Oregon state politics right now. We have a very high threshold for a quorum requirement in Salem. Most states just have a simple majority in order to do business. In Oregon, you have to have 2/3 of the body on the floor to vote. So 17 to 13 Ds to Rs in the Senate means that only 11 Republicans decide not to show up that day, they can't do any business. A ballot measure did pass that said that you can't run for re-election if you have 10 or more unexcused absences. So they thought maybe they'll keep him there. That did not happen. The Republicans walked out in mid-March and then stayed out of Salem until about 2 weeks before the end of session. They did reach a deal on a handful of items, but it did kind of put things in a weird, tense place in the building, and it does set up the stage for a very strange and boring and awkward 2024 session because there's not much sort of to keep them there for a 35-day session unless they can all get along. We can move on to the next one. Thank you. But they did get a lot done. These aren't all the priorities. These aren't the priorities necessarily for LTD, but it's important to note them because this is really what took over a lot of the air in the room. Housing and homelessness and semiconductor incentives were the governor's top 2 priorities. The housing homelessness package especially was big, $200 million package. It established a statewide housing production goal of 36,000 new units per year. This is huge. Obviously, affordability is kind of top of mind here, but we need more supply in this state if we're going to have an affordable place to live. And so along with that, there's a lot of money that went out for rent assistance, shelter beds, expanding urban growth boundary for affordable housing, as well as assistance for agriculture housing. The semiconductor package was a $200 million package that kind of allows the state to put their skin in the game and allow for Oregon companies to apply for federal incentives to make microchips. The extension of business tax credits and other incentives that were set to a sunset, a comprehensive data privacy bill, which was surprisingly not that controversial, but a big priority of the Attorney General since 2019. And public defense reform, this is kind of the first attack at that one. It's $100 million to hopefully fix some of the issues with our unrepresented. There is a huge shortage of attorneys right now. People are basically being arrested and they're not able to have any representation, so they have to let them go. So it adds to some of the crime issues that we're seeing across the state, but really we need more attorneys, they need to get better pay, and it's a national crisis as well that isn't totally fixed as of right now, even with this package. Rent control, you can't increase rent more than 10% in a year, regardless of inflation. That was Senate Bill 611. And a priority of Representative Fahey, local here, was customer choice gasoline, so you can now pump your own gas if you'd like to. Record school spending, $700 million over current service levels, $10.2 billion. Again, we had more money than we thought, and it's coming in. That feels good, and you'll also get a pretty good kicker rebate, biggest in history, coming your way next year. Yeah, next slide, please. But a lot of things didn't get done. Obviously, 3,600 bills. Most of what's going to happen is if you introduce a bill, the chances are pretty good it's going to die just because of the sheer volume of everything. House Bill 2002 I mentioned only because that was kind of one of the key pieces of that walkout. This is the social issues one. Abortion and gender affirming care were kind of in the center of that conversation. Gun control, was not, there was a piece removed out of that one as well. So the age to purchase a firearm was not raised to 21 as in the original bill. Campaign finance reform didn't happen because it never happens. And unless it's a ballot measure, I doubt it will happen, to be quite honest with you. But and then there was a bill from the governor that kind of goes with the housing package to allow cities to unilaterally expand their urban growth boundaries. That one actually had the votes to pass, but it was the last day of session and a couple people happened to be out of the building. So that'll come back and pass in the short session. Next slide, please. So here's what you actually care about, transit priorities. I'm going to go through a handful of these. Number one, I would say the biggest one that one of the hardest fought ones was hiring and retention bonuses. This might sound absolutely crazy, but technically it is illegal in the state of Oregon to offer a bonus just because you want to hire someone or retain them. It's a technicality in our pay equity law, but basically the way it works is you have one bus driver making $50,000 a year. They've been there for a while. You bring another bus driver in for $50,000, but they have a $10,000 bonus. Technically, that person made $60,000 this year. This person here at 50, if they are of a protected class, can claim that they were discriminated against because they have different pay for equal work. Now, we have not seen the deluge of complaints or filings against that, but it is possible, and the state's employment lawyers are very concerned about that. It was looking really good. It passed out of the House with 0 no votes. It sails over to the Senate, where it's going to go to the committee, where the committee chairperson actually helped craft this bill in the first place. She had a change of heart and decided to single-handedly kill it. Leadership at that point could have stepped up and worked around, got it through a different committee, and it would have passed the Senate 29-1. But again, leadership changes, a lot of growing pains. That didn't happen. I think it will come back. It's a big coalition, for-profit, nonprofit, TriMet. It was super key at this table as well. But good issues should pass. Just I think a couple other things happen along the way. The next 3 bills were actually ATU-driven bills. These were their priority bills, 2 of which we opposed, 1 we supported. The first one, strike prohibition repeal. As you know, mass transit employees are prohibited from striking. That's a law that went in place in 2007. And when that law was put in place, ATU was actually very supportive of that. So it was very confusing when they came back and had a bill to repeal that prohibition. Didn't get much traction. Frankly, didn't put much effort, put weight behind it, and it died pretty quickly in that first committee. Similarly, there was also a bill to change the binding arbitration process, and that ATU brought forward, as opposed to having, it was a bunch of changes that it would have made to the arbitration process, but rather than a final offer, sort of winner-take-all process, it would have gone issue by issue. There would have been other DEI requirements for who the arbitrator is. And it was a lot of confusion, not just for us, but also for the committee. There was a hearing. It wasn't very clear what they were asking for or why. And then when it all was said and done, the committee chairperson basically just ended up saying, "Go work it out amongst yourselves." So I don't know if that one's coming back, but obviously a lot of those things happened earlier in the year before probably were considered at a different time in our relationship with the union. The third one we fought really hard for, Senate 787. This was a driver safety bill, trying to increase penalties on assault on drivers. Really, it's hard to keep drivers. We already mentioned the workforce shortage as it is. And we wanted to have similar protections that sort of policemen and firefighters do when they're in the line of duty. It passed through the Senate, kind of same tune, different lyrics, passed through the Senate, flying colors 29-1, went to the House, and by the time it got to the House, there's politics that gets in the way. So the Senate Republicans had already walked out. A bunch of the House Republicans are a little bitter about a bunch of different things. They had a bunch of their bills already killed, including a similar bill to this that was for nurses. So I'm not sure exactly what happened, but usually, you go to the hardcore anti-crime Republicans on the House side, and that committee especially, and you think you get the support, but it didn't happen that way. So we'll have to talk with ETU as well. If they want to bring that back, we would support them if they do. And the last one that was just piece of cake, bread and butter, of making sure that the peer counseling process that we have, that we are making sure that those conversations are confidential. So really simple as that. No opposition across the board, and that would sail through. One more. One more. Do a bunch of these on here. We don't need to go too far into it. The transportation conversation generally this year was all around the I-5 bridge and Rose Quarter. They want to make sure they can actually pull down some of the federal dollars from the transportation package to get a new I-5 bridge. It was chaos. You have people who want the bridge for economic reasons. You have people who they've got the labor unions, and you've also got people who just don't want any more roads or bridges or anything, no more freeways, people like that. So it did get a little crazy at the end. They actually ended up passing a bill to help the bridge process through a budget bill at the very end because it was less political. But that kind of sucked all the air out of the room. Handful of other things. I do want to flag one more for you, the Petroleum Abuse Ban Senate Bill 803, because I know you have a great broad horizon of your clean energy transition. There was a bill that died for a second time this year that would have basically set an end date for when you can sell conventional petroleum and diesel in the state. Sort of a walk towards that cliff and hope by the time you get to the edge of that cliff that there will be a bridge built. Everyone loves renewable diesel. It's awesome. It's a great plug and play fuel, but right now there's not the supply. So that bill did not move forward. I'm just going to do one more because I know we got just a minute left. Moving forward, though, really kind of what our eye on the prize is here is the 2025 transportation package. How we show up is going to be really, really important. We're already in conversations right now with our coalition of other transit agencies and making sure that in 2025, when the transportation package conversations really get going, that we're at the table and we have our priorities set, and we can really do some great things, not just for our communities, but for a long-term sustainable transportation system and ODOT in general. ODOT is suffering up. Their revenues are in the tank and they desperately need dollars. So we need to simultaneously protect our funding, really through STIF in particular, while making sure that the folks who can do roadside assistance and actually build the roads can do so. I guess I'll stop there. If there's like any 1-2 questions. I don't know.
Questions?
Be respectful.
Jordan?
A lot of good work.
Thanks. I tried to do it quickly.
So, do you have any predictions for the short session?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. The word on basically the company line from everybody in the building is it's going to be boring. If you want to keep them there, it's got to be agreed to. It's got to be bipartisan. It's a 35-day short session. You miss 1 week. If you miss 5 days, I mean, they could walk out, 4 days left of session and kill half the things that were set to go through. So it's going to be some technical fixes, some tweaks, some budget adjustments, things like that, which actually was why the short session was created in the first place. So it's the first time we're actually going to be doing it in that fashion.
What are the committees of jurisdiction for LTD?
We particularly joint transportation for one, both House and Senate Energy and Environment committees, especially as again the transition and decarbonization, that space, and both business and labor committees are really important too, with the broad range of different types of staff you have and staffing issues, et cetera.
No, except that Jordan has been extremely helpful in setting up some meetings here, local conversations here, and understanding some of the needs, particularly in our rural communities. Also, we had a conversation briefly around fare systems. We collect fares, and then we go frictionless meeting. Is there a way to not have a special pass and speed up boarding time? And we just had this soft conversation, and 3 days later, I'm done with Apple. So I think our folks are working, of course, in a lot of different ways, beyond understanding the legislation. But also understanding, where we're going as a community, as an agency, and this facility, those conversations.
Thank you very much. Like I said, I mean, obviously feel free to funnel anything questions you have through Pat, but I'm always available.
And if there's anything that, we as a board can do to assist or help, you let us know, right?
Yes, thank you so much.
Pat, do you have anything to add?
I don't at this point, except to say, and this is also relates to what Brett will talk about. Our team has gotten together and have begun internally to outline our legislative priorities for next year. And we have a list, and now we've got to call through and decide what are going to be key. But those will help inform things as we move forward in Salem, but also in 2025. And the same thing with our work with the federal government. The Oregon Transportation Association will meet on October 11th. The board will begin to put together our legislative agenda there as well. So we have a lot of things that are in movement here that I think will be very beneficial to the district. So,
All right, thank you.
thank you. Great, thanks, Jordan. Next up is Brett Garson. And as I mentioned, he's the CEO with SDA, and they've worked with us for many, many years. And I met with Brett and his team a few weeks ago in Washington, D.C. when I was out visiting family. And they're a really strong team. They really keep us abreast of grant opportunities, among other things, that are available for us to compete for in Washington. With that, I'd like to turn things over to Brett.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Good evening. It's great to be with you today. I thought, and I don't know if you can see our presentation up yet. Has it come up yet, Pat?
Yep.
Okay, there we go. You can go to the next slide, Kirsten. So again, I'm Brett Garson. I'm the CEO at Smith, Dawson, and Andrews, and I'm joined by my colleague, Kirsten Stratford, who you'll get a little bit more information on. A little bit of background on Smith, Dawson, and Andrews. We're a government affairs firm based in Washington, D.C., with over 40 years of experience. The founders worked in the White House and the Department of Transportation, focused on local governmental issues as well as transportation issues. We've worked with a host of local governments and transportation interests all over the United States, going back 4 decades. We have a particularly strong experience and interest in public transportation, and we've been focused on that area for a very long time, and have worked with Lane Transit District for over 20 years as part of the United Front, which is the coalition of Oregon local governmental entities that includes Lane County, City of Eugene, City of Springfield, Willamette Lane Park and Rec District, Springfield Public Schools, as well as, of course, Lane Transit District and 4J now. So we're really happy to be with you. Next slide, please, Kirsten. So a little bit of background about myself, Brett Garson again. I was in law school in Washington and kind of knew that I wanted to get into policy and government. And so I got a law clerkship with a U.S. senator. And from there, I was connected to Smith, Dawson, and Andrews and started out as an associate. And I've been there over 15.5 years. And my first clients were working on local government and transportation issues, and have continued to focus on that as we've built out the practice at Smith, Dawson, and Andrews. Our other colleague, Catherine Beal, who's an instrumental part of the team at Smith, Dawson, and Andrews, was unable to join us tonight. She's getting her degree at law school as well. She's in evening classes, so could not join us. But I'll turn it over to Kirsten if you want to give a little bit of background on yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Brett, and good evening, all. It's a pleasure to meet with you virtually. My name is Kirsten Stratford, as Brett mentioned. I'm one of the vice presidents here at Smith, Dawson, and Andrews. I just celebrated my 2-year anniversary with the firm in July, and throughout that time, I've supported a range of clientele, including local governments, nonprofit entities, and transit agencies, and helped to advance their policy and project priorities. Prior to that, I spent 3 years in the House of Representatives working for 2 members out of Maryland. And prior to that, I graduated from Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. We're looking forward to presenting to you all on our efforts in DC. And now I'll pass it back to Brett to discuss recent SDA LTD successes.
There we go. I'm unmuted. The last few years, you guys have been incredibly successful. I would never take credit from SDA for all the work that your staff does. They were instrumental in getting a lot of these grants. They're experts. They do a really nice job, and they're great partners whenever we go after this money. As you can see, starting out in 3 years ago in fiscal year 2021, you all received the funding for the 5 electric buses out of the Bus and Bus Facilities program. In fiscal year 22, you received a congressionally directed spending funding for both the mobile wallet trip planner and the EV replacement, which was a huge win to get 2 projects included. And then again, in fiscal year 23, you got the congressionally directed spending Fleet Fault Protection Crane project that was awarded. And, one of the competitive grants that your team successfully applied for was the FEMA Transit Security Grant Program. It's a testament to the work that you do. We, assist with some of the political support and assist with making sure that you're in front of the right people at the right time. But we couldn't do it without all of you and your staff. Kirsten, you want to go over a little bit of what we do kind of in the background on a regular basis?
Definitely. So Brett has kind of highlighted several occasions where LTD has been successful in pursuing federal dollars over the last few years, but I want to take a few minutes to describe the work that it takes to get there. We think the key to that success is the work we do behind the scenes in collaboration with the LTD team. On a weekly basis, we have a check-in call with Pat Walsh and the United Front partners. This gives us an opportunity to brief LTD on federal updates, but more importantly, it provides us and the partners a regular opportunity to discuss what's happening at a local and regional level. We've seen this open dialogue strengthen the partnerships with the individual entities and be a very collaborative space to discuss ideas, within Lane County. We also spend that time discussing funding opportunities from a weekly grant announcement that we will traditionally send out to Pat and others on the LTD team. An example of this, as Brett mentioned, was the Transit Security Grant Program, which you all, had a major award for. This grant was picked out of our list. LTD, expressed interest in wanting to pursue the program, and we supported your application efforts by drafting and engaging letters of support with the Oregon delegation and being available for program questions. We regularly keep in contact with DOT staff on issues related to BIL implementation and general policy matters. And we generally keep close communication with staff in the Oregon delegation in case we need to, reach out for support for LTD projects or, coordinate site visits, anything under that umbrella. And these are just, some of the ways we engage with LTD individually and as part of a coalition. And I'll pass it back to Brett to kind of discuss a current state of play in DC. But Brett, I don't know if you want to add.
Just a few things I wanted to add. One, you're familiar with the United Front coalition, and that's a very powerful voice in Washington. But each one of the members of the United Front, including Lane Transit District, we also give individual attention and make sure that your specific priorities are elevated. And if anything comes up, we are ready to assist and provide information and intelligence or set up meetings that are necessary. We regularly engage with the Association for Public Transportation, the Bus Coalition. We have a very strong relationship with that group, and you guys have done a really nice job working with them, and they do a really nice job in Washington, D.C. We regularly talk, as Kirsten said, to DOT, to FTA, and also now with more and more zero-emission vehicles being prioritized all over the U.S., we're talking more and more to the Department of Energy and other places. And I know that it's a priority for you all to find, any federal resources. So we're certainly going to continue to engage in agencies such as Health and Human Services and Homeland Security and others to see whether there may be some other resources for Lane Transit District. Next slide, please, Kirsten. Just give you a little bit of a state of play. If hopefully you all haven't spent too much time reading the news clips from this week and the prior week. It's a real mess in Washington. You probably are aware that earlier in the year, there was a debt limit agreement between the president and Congress, and essentially this set top line numbers for federal spending for the fiscal year 24. Unfortunately, the House decided not to go along with those funding levels. The Senate did go along with those funding levels. And now we are trying to, because all the bills will not be passed before the September 30th deadline, trying to pass a continuing resolution. And it's getting stuck up in the House because of internal Republican conference politics. And, you know, we have, I believe, 12 days or 11 days before the end of the fiscal year, less legislative days. And I think that the House Republicans are trying to figure out what they can cut to extend the current law. It's going to be a partisan bill. We feel as though this is going to set up a situation where there will be a government shutdown, which is very unfortunate. Fortunately, even though that a government shutdown, you know, may occur, it's certainly likely it could occur, that transportation doesn't really get affected. One, because the funding is protected. It's almost treated as a mandatory spending, which is good for Lane Transit District and transportation programs. But you know, nonetheless, we have made sure over the last month, right after or the end of August recess, to let Congress know that you're in support with the position from APTA, that you support the funding levels in the Senate bill that go along with public transportation to support public transportation programs. And if no surprise to you all, you're probably aware that your delegation agrees. And so we think there could be a government shutdown, but we feel as though the politics in the Senate being bipartisan, that by the end of the year, there could be a larger deal to get all the spending bills funded. Other legislation that's less relevant to you, but is taking up a lot of time in Congress outside of the annual spending bills, is the Federal Aviation Administration reauthorization, the Farm Bill, which is not on here, and then the National Defense Authorization Act, which is a bill that authorizes defense spending and has been passed in consecutive years for 62 straight years. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kirsten to talk about future advocacy efforts.
Thanks, Brett. So in the months ahead, we will continue our engagement with staff from the Oregon delegation and DOT officials while tracking relevant transportation policy and executive actions by the White House. These are activities that we typically do very regularly, and provide LTD with updates as we receive them. We are planning a visit to Lane County in the fall to meet with partners to discuss the United Front agenda and priorities. We're looking at an early November timeframe for that trip. And we'll usually use that time to have very in-depth meetings with members of the United Front, specifically on LTD's side. We'll meet with Pat and other members of the team to discuss any projects or priorities. And when we return to DC, we'll finalize the agenda with the partners and begin planning our 2024 Washington, DC fly-in. The agenda that we reference is a compilation of, all the partners within the United Front priorities, which we'll take to the Oregon delegation once everyone is in town for the fly-in, as well as relevant agencies. So that's, what we're looking to in the next few months. Brett, I'm not sure if you have anything to add there. And if not, we'll open it up for questions.
Yeah, I think you summed it up very well, Kirsten. We'll be coming out to Oregon and hear your priorities. And we have a pretty good sense, just talking, with folks, Jameson and Pat and others, and knowing that you're pretty aligned with your regional priorities, things like transit-oriented development, making sure there's the appropriate amount of resources for your public transportation, and making sure that all folks have access to public transportation. So with that, we'll leave it open for any questions you may have. Thank you.
Any questions? I was just curious, you mentioned that 4J is now part of the United Front, that's a recent development?
That is a recent development. They approached the United Front partners at our firm last year and indicated interest in potentially joining the group. And following that, they came back to us, I would say about 3 months ago, and said there really is interest. We really want to be collaborative. And we had conversations with each individual partner to gauge where they felt and whether they had feedback on that. And after talking with everyone, they agreed to allow 4J as part of the partnership, and 4J is now included in the United Front group.
I did have a question. Does SDA ever try or go after non-solicited proposals with, especially with some of the non-traditional organizations or entities?
With the
Non-traditional funders, right? We're talking about.
Philanthropies and.
No, within, like Health and Human Services you talked about, that some of the, not the transportation, but the Pentagon, just other federal agencies that may be interested in something that's happening.
Oh, so are you talking discretionary, or we would approach the agencies with a concept and see if they'd be open to developing a pilot?
Right, correct.
Yeah, we've regularly met with agencies. There were years where Congress had a lot less control of federal funding, and so we've always kind of prioritized meeting with federal agencies. And one of the key talking points that we always make sure that anyone that's going into those meetings is that, are there any opportunities for partnerships or pilots, demonstration programs with the agency? And sometimes there's a lot of the times it's more on the technical assistance side, especially you're seeing that now. But I know that that's something that we've always moved forward with, and we've had success with a county a few years back on a community resource center on an unsolicited proposal, and so it's something that you talk to program managers, and maybe they have some opportunity within their budget, and then you potentially can go pursue it.
Any other questions or comments? We'll look forward to seeing you in November.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Add anything else?
No, I just want to thank Brett and Jordan for being here tonight. Like I said, they're real strong partners of ours, and we work very collaboratively with one another, and I think we're in good hands. I firmly believe that. So, thank you.
Thank you all.
I did have one question. Okay, we'll get back to Brian. I am interested in the United Front process on joining, how that all kind of works out. Not heard. I have recently heard about the 4J.
Yeah, I am, because I'm new to the group. I have to admit I don't know what the process is, but I will find out and get back to all of you on how that works.
Okay. And now it is Joan Kramer's turn to talk to us about vacant property. This will be fun.
I think so. Oh, there you go. Ready? All right. Good evening, board. So we wanted to discuss with the board tonight, actually 3 particular properties that LTD owns that we don't currently use for transit. So hence the term vacant. And so I want to talk about those with you tonight and what we might want to do with those. And then depending on where that conversation goes, maybe early next calendar year, we'll come back with a plan on pursuing those pathways. So, next slide, please. I'm going to save my neck by looking back. I just have it in front of me. So tonight we'll run through some details of each property, pretty high level, but give you some context. And then we'll cover some staff recommendations. And then we'll open it up for discussion and talk about next steps. So pretty straightforward. Next slide, please. So this is a map of our service area. The 3 stars on the map show you where these properties are. So I'm just going to give you some context as to where they are. And then we'll go to the next slide, please. They're primarily in the northwest part of Eugene. And then from left to right, we have 310 Garfield, which is adjacent to our RideSource facility at 2nd and Garfield Street in West Eugene. Then the other property is 11 River Avenue, which is nestled right there at the intersection of Beltline and River Road, really. And then just north of there is the Hunsaker property at the intersection of River Road and Hunsaker. And I'll talk about details of each one of those, but I just want to give you a sense of where these properties are at in our service area. Feel free to flag me down if I'm not making sense or you've got questions. Next slide, please. So 310 Garfield, the site selection process for the RideSource facility, which this is right next to, resulted in the acquisition of actually 8 acres at the corner of 2nd and Garfield. The new RideSource facility only required 3 acres, and that left us a balance of 5. And I'll just note that it doesn't say 5 up there, but because we've actually reserved an amount for RideSource to expand if need be. So that's the discrepancy in the numbers there. So we retained that extra acreage, and we retained that for the purpose of possibly a future satellite facility. If we decided we want a smaller base on the west side of town, was one concept. Over the years, we've actually gotten some revenue from that site. We have a railroad spur that was on there, so there's a lease associated with that. We had an old office complex on the site for a while as well. And we actually saved some money on the West Eugene MX project because we allowed the contractor to mobilize their construction there. So it's served some purposes throughout the years. Currently, the site is being used as a safe sleep site for the city of Eugene. And that's allowed them to obviously make some progress with their impact on the homeless situation in the community. Next slide, please. 11 River Avenue. So for about 40 years, this was the River Road Transit Station. So it served as our transportation hub for the northwest part of Eugene. LTD had a no-cost land lease agreement with the county who owned the property up until the recession of 2008. And so the recession hit the county pretty hard, and they needed to find some revenue sources, and they wanted to sell the property. And so at that time, we bought the property with federal funds. And of course, that allowed us to continue operating there, operating the service out of there, and it helped the county out as well in terms of their financial needs. Next slide, please. Hunsaker. So Hunsaker was acquired as part of the Santa Clara Transit Station project in 2015. This property was in the right location for the relocation of the operation at the River Road site, but it had more property. Again, similar to the RideSource facility, it was more property than needed for that particular project, which is only 3 acres, and that gives another balance of 5 acres that we have been using. Just a little bit about this site. It's got some meaningful history, especially to the neighborhood up there in the community. It was once the local Grange that facilitated farmer gatherings and community services. Its most recent history was actually the Santa Clara Elementary School, which was decommissioned back in the early 2000s. So since then, the site has primarily sat there vacant as it's exchanged ownership between the school district, a private developer, then a bank, and then eventually to LTD. And also note that that site has a planned unit development or PUD overlay on it. And that's basically a land use requirement that puts some sideboards on what can be developed there, what can and can't be developed there, as well as a prescribed public participation process with that. And we went through that as part of the Santa Clara station, if you may remember that. All right, next slide. So these are some recommendations that staff has based on what we know. I just gave you a kind of a high level picture of the properties. But these recommendations, there's not necessarily a right or wrong, but this is a spot for us to start the conversation. Regarding 310 Garfield, we recommend that we retain ownership of that site. Of the three properties here, it's actually one that we've had the least interest in from possible buyers. People knock on our door all the time about different things, and this one not so much. It's also an opportunity for us to, as I mentioned, if we thought it could be a satellite facility, it could also potentially be probably combined with RideSource in some way, a future replacement for this site if we decided we need to move to a different location for emergency preparedness or what have you. But so I think we'd like to look at that some more. But and of course, it's supporting the unhoused need currently with our agreement with the city of Eugene. And just real quick on the Safe Sleep site, and I can talk more about what a Safe Sleep site is if you would like me to, but I was going to mention just a couple stats that the city provided me. Over the last fiscal year, that site has served 154 unique individuals, and 7 of those folks have actually exited the program onto some permanent housing. So some good stuff coming out of there. It remains full with a long waiting list as well. So it's a pretty good program. Any questions on that? Okay, we'll move on to the next one, which is 11 River Avenue. We recommend selling that property. We don't need it for transit use. We did just move everything out of there up a little ways on River Road to the Santa Clara Transit Station. For that reason, it doesn't serve the operation well, it doesn't serve the customers well anymore. So there's no need for transit operating out of there anymore. And if you recall, I mentioned that it's been funded with federal dollars. And so because of that, it needs to be used for public transportation in some manner. So we can't just hang on to it and do something different with it. It's got to be used for transit service in some way. So we do recommend selling that parcel. We have had a few folks come to us interested in whether it's a land lease or buying it right out. So it's in a good commercial spot. It's got some energy there. And any proceeds from that, FTA will allow us to reinvest that into other capital priorities of the district. So that could be another fixed asset, it could be buses, something in our capital program. And then last property, Hunsaker, the staff recommends pursuing a transit-oriented development potential there, or TOD. So our intent would be to partner with the neighborhood and the city in some way that leverages the stations next door. Over the years, the city has actually had some rich dialogue with the neighborhood regarding land use and development standards in that area, and we've been a part of that dialogue as well. So there's already some energy about what could happen in that space, as well as just up and down the River Road corridor. And we'd like to potentially work with the city. They have a group that has expertise in soliciting for this kind of development scenario. So that could be a pathway we go there, which is a little bit divergent of what we've done before. So I think we'd like to talk about that with you. Yeah. Next slide, please. And actually, can you go to the next one after that? we just cruise right along. So again, we'd like to come back with some plans or some scenarios for you to have more meat to them to react to early part of next year based on the guidance we get from you this evening. If these sound like the right recommendations, I'd like to see more on those and what that path might really look like. I'd love to hear that. So I'll stop there and open it up. And I don't know if Jameson, you wanted to add anything to what I said there. Oh, thank you, sir.
So,
Can you just refresh my memory when we had the conversation about providing these sites to the city to use as the safe living site? Did we talk about more than just Garfield in that capacity?
We did. So a couple of years ago, the city was looking into earnest for multiple sites around town. And so in particular with us, the Garfield site, is that the Wellesley River Road Station site. They opted to just pursue the Garfield site because I think they had something just down River Avenue. I think they still do. I forget the name of it, but they had a resource operation there as well. So we did talk about a couple locations. Yeah.
Okay, so their interest in those properties to support that effort are no longer in the conversation.
Not River Road Station, no. I will say on the Garfield site, where they currently have the safe sleep location, the city has probably been one of the more vocal folks about potentially wanting to buy it from LTD. But we have a pretty good agreement with them right now, just in terms of a lease of the space. But I think they would be interested in potentially buying it if that's where the board wanted to go.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair, Gino has his hand raised.
Gino.
Yeah, I have a question on the Hunsaker property. Could you talk about what our financial goals might be when we enter into a partnership with whoever?
I think that's one of the things we should. I'm assuming that was directed to me. I can't see him. I can't see Gino. Sorry. Yeah, I think that's a question for all of us here. Is in terms of priorities or goals, is it to recoup the initial investment that would give us a one-time influx of cash, or is it something to look at a different outcome, a broader outcome for the community? It could be a housing opportunity there, or something else that is of value to the neighborhood up there that might not be.
Do you need that direction this evening, or is that something that we can think about and you can give us some different alternatives to look at as we move forward?
Yeah, thanks for that question. If the board is interested in pursuing something other than just a straight sale and recouping the initial investment, what I would like to do is come back at the beginning of the year with a scenario that might look at a partnership with the city. And I don't know, we could talk about what that partnership looks like in terms of the asset that we bring to the table is the property, right? So we can talk about what that might look like. But the city could provide some information, and I think they'd be willing to give you a presentation as to how they would see something happening here. They've done some work, like I said, with the neighborhood on how it could possibly develop, how LTD could partner with the city on this. I will mention the city has some funds that they could invest in this as well. But I think that all that's in play. So I think we could come back with a scenario 1 or 2 in January for you.
Okay, that works. Thanks.
Yeah.
What is the community response to, the different communities to each of these properties? Do they feel connecting to them, or are there things that they specifically want, or?
And I'll do a side eye over here to Tom because he lived with me. But the Hunsaker community that has which is the Santa Clara neighborhood, has probably the most energy and interest in what happens there. So I think we'd like to partner with them, and it would be a value add for them as to whatever happens there. Regarding the other properties, Garfield, not so many neighbors. That's a heavily industrialized area. But I will say, since the city has been there, so we have a 5-year lease with the city for the Safe Sleep site. They've been there for 2 years, and most of our issues with regard to things that you don't want going on that property have gone away because the site is managed now, and so we don't have those sort of liabilities going on. So the neighborhood is actually a little bit nicer to be around, I guess I would say. And then on the River Road site, I know the neighborhood wasn't terribly interested in it becoming a safe sleep site, which I think is one of the reasons that the city stepped away from that. But I'm not sure what we're thinking up there in terms of our neighbors. Tom, you know what our neighbors up there?
Nothing much beyond what Joe said. I do appreciate Gino's question about the finances. I think there's a couple different strategies we can take a hard look at, and the goal for tonight was to reintroduce these three properties, and kind of where we're thinking around is, but we'll take a hard look on what partnership with the city or with other entity could look like. And I think it's important to note that the Santa Clara neighborhood and the River Road neighborhood are very vocal about what they like to see in their community, and rightfully so. So we'll be taking some of the learnings from the community outreach and communications assessment into that process, along with some of the previous conversations that we learned, relationships that we had, and determine what's a true community asset for that parcel.
And there's no time pressure on these decisions.
That's the wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Is we're not under big pressure. One of the notions of waiting until after the first of the year is so we get through some of that COCA process and we have a better understanding of what the community might need and how to communicate with folks. Yeah, we're no time crunch. We want to get it right. Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you.
And, we have a beautiful transit station right there, brand new transit station, and it's charging infrastructure where 15-minute headways pick up along that corridor. And this is a perfect application of a transit-oriented development project. The perfect application. So we're looking forward to seeing what the partnership arrangements could look like.
Switching gears from these particular properties, I know I saw probably 2 years ago some preliminary plans in Cottage Grove for a multi-use transit, and I think they were in talks about partnership. I don't know if anybody in the room was in those. They were beautiful. They also kind of wove our unhoused situation in at the time, which has drastically changed over time. But I was just curious, because that involved some property in an area where we also had an unhoused camp. I just didn't know if there had been any discussions that anyone was aware of. I can certainly ask in Cottage Grove, but just curious.
I'm looking at Joe and Tom's face.
No, okay.
Yeah.
I know our city government was involved with that.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that doesn't ring a bell for me.
Okay, we've had leadership changes since then, so it may have been put on that one or something.
We can reach out to Jake as well this week.
Added to the list.
Yeah, it's been a while now. There were those
It
things.
seems like I remember Don talking about.
Yes.
Anything else, Joe?
No, I don't think so. Maybe just generally, do those sound like the right pathways on those three properties? Do you have any, we talked about Hunsaker a fair amount, but anything else on the other 2 options of hanging on and selling?
I think what we talked about was after the first of the year, more of a, precise recommendations from staff.
For sure, yeah. And so that we'll be getting back some information on those particular pathways. So, all right, thank you.
That concludes the work session. And we have a 5-minute break between now and going into our board meeting. So we'll come back in 5 minutes and do this, right? our first meeting to order. And we'll begin. We'll read my roll call, so. Lino Grimaldi. Offside, but he's here. Susan Cox. Pete Knox.
Here.
Sally Sutherland. Lawrence Green.
Here.
Michelle Weber. Here. And Heather Murphy. Here. Thank you. Are there any announcements or additions to the agenda from anyone? Michelle? Then get to do a really fun part. I think this is always a highlight of the meeting, and this is the employee of the month.
So members of the board, it is my honor this month to introduce our September 2023 Employee of the Month, Amanda McGill. Amanda started her career at LTD in 2006 as an operator. In 2008, she was nominated and selected to be Employee of the Month, a large part just for her general customer service. She greets our customers. She was, provided very good customer service. And Amanda in 2011 competed for and was selected as a transportation supervisor. And she continued to carry that customer service spirit into her role as a supervisor. But her customers changed. So her customers now became bus operators and then downstream are bus riders. So she put a lot of what she learned as a bus operator into practice as a supervisor to support our frontline bus operators. So she's been really instrumental in that. Amanda was nominated, so I sit on the committee that evaluates the nominations, and Amanda's name comes up again and again and again. So she has a lot of support from her peers, and you'll see that by the paparazzi and the entourage that she has with her tonight. And then I also just want to point out that I consider myself to be a morning person, but she is here 2 hours before I wake up in the morning. And she's here with a bright smile. She's here to do a lot of troubleshooting. Oftentimes in the morning, we have some gaps to fill, and she's unshakable. She fills those gaps. She makes sure that we make our pullouts, and she makes sure that our bus operators start their day with a smile and with courteous and respectful service. So it's my honor and my privilege to introduce our 2023 September Employee of the Month, Amanda McGill.
I just want to thank everyone. I have my support from my team, the operators. I actually am one of the weird ones and really like being here in the morning. We have a great time. It's a different atmosphere at 4:45 in the morning, but it's fun. I thank all of you guys for all your hard work. I wouldn't be here for 18 years if it wasn't something I'm proud of. I have my kids here, and the best thing they did is when I brought the poster home, they both came to me and they were like, "Mom, I'm so proud of you." And it made me feel so good because I'm so proud of what I do here and what this company is doing and what it has the ability to do for this community. It's what we need. I love that I'm getting my kids to grow up and be bus riders and everything. So thank you again, and that's about it.
I think they should come up for a picture.
All right, come on, kiddos. The funny thing is, I had both of them here, so I drove with Ethan until the day before he was born, so. Oh my God.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
You really do have your own little fan club. This is.
Hey, wow.
Okay, all right then.
Yep, this is the one.
Congratulations. Yes, those were always fun. And you can add this to your wall.
Awesome.
And.
Uh-oh. I didn't know I needed to put it back.
And then this is a letter.
Perfect. Awesome.
And a check And then this pin, which I understand that the stone changes for the month.
It does,
So-
yeah, the birthstone kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You guys speak for all the board when saying that that's always the highlight of our meeting. Didn't take a nap to do it. Okay, so, is there any audience participation if you're waiting to speak?
No,
Okay. Is Gino logged in?
Mino is not
Okay.
logged in.
He's probably tired of moving his son today. Okay, so are there any board member reports, any committees or meetings that board want to report on? Want to make something up? Not right now. Oh, okay. I'll give you more time. Okay, so the consent calendar. The action and approval is the general manager evaluation process. So that's something that we need approval on this presenting.
No, just somebody gets.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
We should be approving these.
Okay, can we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move adoption of LTD resolution number 2023-09-20-042. It is hereby resolved that the consent calendar for September 2023 is approved as presented.
Second. Thank you. So we have moved and seconded. And we, so I'll start voting. Peter, with you. Aye. Florence?
Yes.
Heather? Aye. Michelle?
Yes.
And Susan? Aye. And Gino? Thank you. Okay. Scott Sorensen. Be talking about the Happy Sorensen, okay.
Good evening, board members. My name is Scott Sorensen, IT manager. I want to thank you for the opportunity to present tonight. Presenting on the Bontas CAD-AVL upgrade and synchronization project. Before I get too far in here, I'd like to talk about a couple of acronyms I'll be using tonight so you guys understand what those mean. The CAD-AVL, CAD means computer aided dispatch. AVL is automatic vehicle location. And IVLU is integrated vehicle logic unit. A lot of stuff there. So this project is to upgrade about half of our buses, 61 buses to be exact, and to put new IVLU units, and this is the main computer system on the buses, to bring these up to the newest IVLU unit. Our newer buses have this new unit already on. The older buses do not. They're still using an older IVLU unit. They're kind of bringing the main computer system for these older buses up to par with the newer buses. We will also be adding some software upgrades, helping our operators with a turn-by-turn feature, navigation feature that they can use while they're en route. It will also allow us to do mobile device management, manage a lot of the IT devices, mainly the IVLU device, from a remote location. Currently, we have to be on the bus to really do a lot of work on those devices, but we'll be able to help operators and do management of those devices from a remote location, which will expand our capabilities to support the buses greatly. So could you please forward the slide to the graphic? I'd like to take a minute here to describe briefly describe the IT components on the bus. If you look at the graphic up there, the IVLU unit is the one circled in red. As you can see, a lot of lines are going to that unit. It's the main IT component on the buses. I'm going to go around and talk briefly about the items that are hooked up to the IVLU. I'll start on the left side with the radios. We have the Cradlepoint cellular modem, and this is a modem that allows communication between the bus and outside here to the LTD. We have fare validators. We have the video and other cameras. We have internal and external signage. These are the electronic signs on the buses. We have audio announcements, passenger counters, vehicle telemetry, and the MDT screen, which is the main communication screen that the operators use while they're operating the bus, video screen, if you will. You may notice that a lot of the items up on the top of the graphic are circled in green. Those are items that we are currently or will soon be upgrading. So we're doing a lot of upgrades for our bus IT systems. And again, the IVLU is at the heart of those. So this is a very key upgrade for those systems. Can you please go to the next slide? Thank you. So I'm going to briefly go over some of the benefits, the why of why we're doing this. We'll have increased efficiency of the bus IT systems. When we upgrade the systems on these 61 buses, all those systems will be standardized around one piece of hardware, which will be great. A lot less work for us to support that. There'll be better rider performance or rider experience because our en-route rider refresh rate for the data will be faster with the new systems than the old systems. We'll also see increased reliability of those systems that riders will enjoy. It'll provide a great deal of support and maintenance ease. Again, we'll be supporting one standardized system as opposed to the current two that we're doing. Our IT staff will only have to know one of those systems. They'll have more effective support and for current and future needs. Again, this is a major part of our IT systems on the buses. The IVLU will no longer be a bottleneck for those upgrades. When we upgrade part of another system on there, the IVLU will be in full support of that upgrade. We'll be able to support our operators better with this upgrade. The navigation feature that I talked about earlier will be there. Turn by turn is what we call it. You guys might use it on your phones with Google Maps or what have you. They'll have better support for that. We'll also be able to support them with the IT systems on the bus while they're en route. So if one of those IT systems is having issues, we'll have greater capabilities to assist them and support them when they need that. We'll have increased reliability and capabilities around remote monitoring, testing, and upgrading. Again, we won't have to be on the buses physically. We'll be able to do a lot of this monitoring and upgrading remotely, which will greatly increase our capabilities. We'll be able to see when systems are struggling and having issues as opposed to waiting for the bus to come back into the yard and having big issues with them. As I mentioned before, it really builds on our current and future upgrades and expands the possibilities for our IT system. It really synergizes and leverages our investments on the bus IT systems. So I want to thank you for your time tonight. Ask you to approve the contract, and if there are any questions on this.
Let me jump in real quick just before you guys get to that point. I'm going to explain really quick the process of our procurement. So we did a sole source contract for that. And so basically we vetted the contract, we looked at best practice in the industry, and then looked at the needs of this contract and needs of the district, and then determined that was the best way for us to go. And we do have a very robust process around that. And so we will follow that process that's in our procurement policy as well, the ORS regulations.
And do I remember correctly, you already worked with this group, so you're familiar with that?
Yeah, we have a master service agreement with them, and so we'll just be adding that to the agreement.
Other questions?
Thank you. I So you've got something like 60 some odd buses that are older, that have the older style, older version of the IBLU. And according to what you said, is that basically one of the issues with having these older ones is that you're committing staff time and other things to do things that and you gain a lot of efficiency by upgrading them. And so, because this is a fairly expensive contract, but there's probably a point, and I doubt you know the actual number, but there's got to be a point where the cost of upgrading is penciled out because your staff time is not as committed, and you can do some of these things remotely. Is that correct?
Yeah, this will greatly increase the efficiency of our staff time and reduce the number of hours that we're spending supporting these buses.
And from a procurement standpoint, if we were to replace everything, it would be more costly because we would have to replace the whole fleet and then train the fleet on a brand new system. So we found it more cost effective to actually upgrade the system we had that was already on several of the buses, and then to get us all of our fleet up to that same level of efficiency.
And so the older ones are also not just a staff time, but you mentioned that you basically, so not all of these, some of these buses that are older, but still have the older version of the IBLU. They could be on our fleet for quite a while, right?
Yes, we do have some buses that are getting pretty long in the tooth, but are still needed and still in use.
So what I'm getting at here is what you said, I think, is that that there's going to be bottlenecks in future upgrades. So in a way, you're trying to future-proof those potential upgrades that we may not even know about. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Great questions.
Any other questions? Jameson, do you have anything to add?
Just this item was started in the finance committee, usually would be on the consent item list, but the dollar amount for a sole source, probably prudent to pull this off for further discussion. We want to thank you for explaining the process for details putting through the sole for the procurement at 800 for that.
Yeah, not something we looked at lightly. It was a lot of consideration for that.
Yeah. I also remember you saying that the training was going to be pretty seamless, that for the operators, it was not going to be this huge learning curve. That seemed like a real plus to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a system they're already using, and so it just little enhancements that'll make it better.
So, Michelle?
Yeah, at the finance committee meeting, I did go back and watch that recording, and there was also a question which I thought was relevant regarding driver attention to the road and the surrounding area. That might be helpful to share that feedback with this group.
Yeah, we're taught, in our own vehicles, not, to keep your eyes on the road. And so the question was with the MDT, go back a screen there, slide please. Thank you. Would they be looking at the screen while they're driving? And of course they wouldn't. I think one of we had Jake or someone talk about how important it is for those operators to keep their eyes on the road. So.
Yeah, I can expand real quick on that. So essentially it all boils down to our training and how we train our operators. So we can put the most robust technology in a bus, but we still need operators to, exactly what Scott said, follow the skills that we teach them in regards to the Smith system and paying attention to it. So we have rules in place, when you can talk on a phone, when you can look at these type of things. So we're directing our vision to what's going on in front of us, because that's our biggest scare, actually, when each big vehicles around, and that's how we train. And then to piggyback a little bit on Pete's question, talking about servicing the vehicles an upgrade, what that does is it allows us not to have an operator have to go get the bus. It's currently, in order to fix and troubleshoot that stuff, we have to take an operator and have them go get the bus, bring it back, take the bus out of service so we can service the bus. A lot of times we may not have an operator because they're all participating in the service. So when we're doing that, we're actually taking a mechanic off his duties and having them go take a bus. So they're trying to troubleshoot a bus, fix a bus. Meanwhile, they're going out, bringing the bus out and it's out of service. So that's one of the efficiencies that we'll.
Can I make a minor revision to the motion? I'm sorry to do this now. So the agenda item summary talks about why we're doing a sole source, and it's the efficient utilization of existing goods requires acquiring compatible goods or services. And that language really needs to be in the resolution to be proper. So if I could just say that out loud and then someone can say so moved, that'll work. So on the third whereas, do I need to, okay, on the third whereas, it should state, whereas the board has determined the CAD/ADL system through Trapeze Vontage should be procured through the sole source procurement process as the efficient utilization of existing goods requires acquiring compatible goods or services. No, that should satisfy it.
Is there a motion? So moved. Second. So let's vote. Bill? Yes. Heather? Aye. Lawrence?
Yes.
Aye. Susan? Yes, so it's unanimous. Thank you. Michelle, I really appreciate you asking that question again, because in the finance, so interesting to hear you talk about the drivers and safety. So thanks for bringing that up. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Lindy. So, written reports. Oh, no, that was done. Never mind. And so monthly department reports for September, Jameson?
Sure. So any of the written reports, if any questions, happy to take those. We'll point out where our ridership is growing. It's growing slowly, but it is growing at a healthy clip. Sounds like a contradiction, but we're at about 14% on our weekday ridership over year to date, and 14% on our weekday ridership on MX, 16% on our fixed route. Our paratransit continues to grow as well, but we all know that there are things happening in our community. So in public safety, we've seen an increase in ordinance violations, almost 7% year to date. But at the same time, we're also seeing an almost 6% increase in the number of fare validations that we're doing. And I want to point out that the public safety team has developed a strategy of focusing on where the need is greater. And we are hearing reports that we're having more activity along MX, particularly on West MX, West 11, where we get considerable issues out there. That said, most of the ridership trends are going in the right direction. We wish that they grow faster. You know, the rule of thumb in the industry has been pre and post pandemic. I've said many times, I think that the system has changed, how people interact with the system has changed, how people go to work has changed, and we'll continue to look at what that means for LTD moving forward. But we are seeing more ridership there. As far as marketing and communications, marketing continues to promote passes to students and promote different events throughout the community to encourage transit ridership and also to put a positive spin in some corners of our community as well. So with that, I'll kind of stop there. Actually, I'll point one thing out on the chart here. the place where I get to spend money, delegated authority. Delegated authority. There is a line item on there, the second to last one, you'll see a name, Carolina Selva. Carolina Selva is a consultant who began TriMet University, worked for several other Fortune 500 organizations to establish training programs, leadership training programs. That is an identified area of focus for our organization in the budget one as well. We're going to start with our supervisors and managers and feel that our supervisors, they take that first step into managing people, and that's a big step. The other steps are big too. That's the significant career piece. So we're going to invest in our supervisors here and ensure that they're delivering in the right ways. But then that training will encompass what's the administrative staff as well as components of our components of our overall training program that includes our representative staff. So with that, I'll take your question.
I guess we're welcome. Okay, any comments from other people attending? Well, it isn't as late as it seems because it's almost dark out. I just want to say again how much I appreciate all of the staff for participating and continuing on in your training. Doing such good work to educators so we don't have questions. Okay. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Recording stopped.